Shakahola Forest, a name that once meant nothing more than a stretch of dry land in Kilifi County, is now forever linked to one of the darkest tragedies in Kenya's history. In 2023, the forest became a graveyard, a secret burial ground where hundreds of men, women, and children were laid to rest in shallow graves there. Lives stolen under the command of a preacher who promised heaven but delivered only death. At the center of this chilling story is Paul Mackenzie, a man who began as a taxi driver before reinventing himself as a preacher. He founded the Good News International Church in Malindi, preaching fiery sermons about the end of the world. He railed against modern life, calling school
Petro hakusoma. Na sasa mimi nasoma kiwa fuata nani? Kwa sababu kuto kusoma ni dhambi.
His followers. Mackenzie was a prophet chosen by God to lead them to salvation. Survivors would later testify that Mackenzie's teachings grew increasingly extreme over time.
Faini milioni moja au gerezani mwaka moja. Sasa wafanyabiashara hapa, sijui mnasema mumeokoka, mtajiepushaje na chapa ya mnyama 666 na nyinyi muko kwa biashara? Na andiko linasema kila mmoja angeweza kuuza wala kununua pasipo chapa ya nambari ya huyo mnyama. Nyote mtadungwa nacho. Bila hivyo mtakubali injili, muokoke, muje tuteseke sote, Yesu atunyakue twende mbinguni.
Washirika wanasema ni kweli yale anahubiri, maana yeye alikuwa anapenda kuhubiri hiki kitabu cha Ufunuo, basi anahubiri. Na hata sisi nikakwambia tulikuwa tuna nyimbo tunapenda kuimba kwa hiyo kanisa.
April 2023, reports began surfacing of missing relatives. Mothers told police their children had disappeared into the bush. Villagers whispered that people were starving themselves to death. When police finally raided the forest, what they found stunned the nation. Survivors, skeletal and weak, crawled out from hiding places. Some begged for food and water. Others refused help, insisting they wanted to die to remain faithful. And then came the graves, dozens of them, scattered across the forest floor. As investigators exhumed bodies day after day, the numbers rose. By mid-year, over 300 bodies had been pulled from the earth. Autopsies revealed starvation as the leading cause of death, but pathologists also found evidence of violence, suffocation, blunt force trauma, and strangulation. Children in particular showed signs of smothering. Survivors confirmed what the medical report suggested. One testified some children cried for food. Their parents tried to sneak them food, but the leaders punished them. Some children were killed so they would not delay the journey to heaven. The reaction across Kenya was immediate and explosive. Families gathered outside mortuaries in Malindi and Kilifi, clutching photographs of loved ones and crying out their names. Crowds screamed in anguish as body bags were carried past them. A grieving father told reporters, "I went to the police months ago and said my son had been taken by Mackenzie. They laughed at me. Now I have to search for his body." Across the nation, anger burned. Radio talk shows filled with callers demanding accountability. Newspapers ran daily stories questioning why Mackenzie had been arrested several times before, only to be released each time. Parliament was forced to debate the issue, and Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki declared it mass murder, plain and simple. The government launched a sweeping crackdown. Mackenzie and dozens of his followers were arrested. Police sealed off Shakahola Forest, declaring it a crime scene. A presidential task force on religious organizations was established in May 2023, tasked with finding ways to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. By January 2024, the task force released its report recommending tighter regulation of churches, a national registry of religious institutions, financial audits, and hotlines for members to report abuse. Soon after, Parliament debated the Religious Organizations Bill, a proposed law requiring all churches to register, disclose their funding, and submit to oversight. The debate was fierce. Supporters of the bill argued that Shakahola proved the need for regulation, saying that lives had to be protected at all costs. Critics warned that the state could misuse the law to target smaller ministries and interfere with freedom of worship. Some pastors feared their churches could be closed if they failed to meet strict new standards. But for grieving families, the debate felt hollow. As one woman outside Malindi mortuary said, "We trusted the government to protect us, but our children died. What is freedom of worship if it leads to mass graves?" Meanwhile, the trials began. Mackenzie and his co-accused faced hundreds of charges, including murder, terrorism, and child abuse. Survivors gave harrowing testimony. One man described digging graves for those who died, saying, "We buried people in silence. If you cried, you were told you lacked faith." A mother recounted how her daughter begged for water before collapsing, adding, "I still hear her voice at night." Another survivor told the court, "We were told food was from Satan. I watched my brother die slowly, and they told me to thank God." Each testimony added to the weight of evidence, painting Mackenzie as a manipulator who used fear, isolation, and twisted scripture to control his followers. But just when Kenyans thought the worst was over, new horrors emerged. In August 2025, investigators uncovered fresh graves at Kwabinzaro, near Shakahola. 34 more bodies were exhumed, along with over 100 body parts. Survivors led police to burial sites that had remained hidden for 2 years. 11 new suspects were arrested. Once again, families waiting for closure were plunged into grief. "We thought the digging was over," one mother said. "Now they tell us there are more graves. How many more times will we suffer?" The massacre drew worldwide attention. Major outlets like the BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera ran daily updates. Analysts compared Shakahola to Jonestown in Guyana, where more than 900 followers of Jim Jones died in a mass poisoning in 1978. Others drew parallels to Heaven's Gate in the United States, where 39 members committed suicide in 1997, believing they would ascend to a spaceship. The tragedy was also compared to the siege of Waco in Texas, where David Koresh's cult ended in flames after a standoff with the FBI. For many international observers, Shakahola proved that cults remain a global threat, capable of striking anywhere that poverty, ignorance, and weak regulation intersect. Human rights groups condemned Kenya's slow response. The United Nations called for greater protection of vulnerable communities against exploitation. Experts abroad warned that cults often thrive in environments where trust in government is low and people are desperate for hope. In this sense, Shakahola was not just a Kenyan tragedy but a global lesson. Today, the search for justice continues. Mackenzie remains in custody, facing charges that could lead to life imprisonment. Survivors live with trauma, some in shelters under protection, others trying to rebuild their lives in silence. Families still wait for DNA results to identify their loved ones, their grief stretched over years. The government continues to monitor fringe religious groups, but the deeper issue remains unresolved. How can a society that is deeply faithful guard against those who exploit that very faith for power? Shakahola is more than just a massacre. It is a symbol of systemic failures of law enforcement, of courts, of community vigilance. It is a story about how faith can be twisted into a weapon, how the vulnerable can be manipulated, and how silence allows evil to thrive. Even now, as new graves are found and fresh suspects are arrested, the nightmare is not over. For families, closure is still far away. For Kenya, the challenge is ensuring that such a tragedy never happens again. And for the world, Shakahola is a warning. Cults are not relics of the past. They are here, they are dangerous, and they flourish in the shadows. This is Crime Files Key, and this is the story of the Shakahola Massacre, a story of faith twisted into destruction, of a nation grappling with grief and anger, and of a world forced to confront the darkest edges of belief.